Hi, everyone. This is Miss Goins, and welcome to Junior Seminar. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Paving Pathways Counseling Program and choosing your pathway. Today's conversation is going to specifically focus on college. If you are interested in a pathway other than college, more information will be coming forth. Stay tuned and watch some of the other videos that we'll be posting on the JTP Counselors Corner YouTube channel. So when we're talking about post-secondary pathways, as I mentioned, today's conversation is largely going to be about college. So college includes any institution of higher education that awards a degree or credential post-high school graduation. And so we're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about four-year colleges specifically, which will lead to a student getting awarded a bachelor's degree. But then there are also two-year colleges out there, such as the City Colleges of Chicago, and then there are trade schools as well. And these are some examples of the other post-secondary pathways. Again, more information about these pathways can be found in subsequent videos. So, if you are considering college, these are some questions to ask yourself. Who are you as a person and as a student? This is where knowing your own values and knowing what it is that you're looking for in your institution of higher education come into play. What are you hoping to gain in your college education? Think about the academic setting that you're going to learn best in. Do you want to be in a rural environment? Do you want to be in a college town? Do you want to be in a city? Public, private? So many choices, right? And so these are things that you want to ask yourself as you are considering which college or colleges to pursue. Think about what your learning style is. What are your strengths? What are some areas of growth, right? Think about what you're passionate about and think about what majors and careers are well suited for you. And we will certainly be talking more about these various factors and things to keep in mind during seminar. So when we talk about college fit, think about how does a school feel to you? So fit is related to feel. Is the campus a place that you see yourself fitting into? Can you see yourself thriving there socially, personally, and emotionally? So when we talk about fit, we want you to get into a first choice school and stay there. Fit plays a huge role in this. How does that campus environment, how does that institution feel for you? Is it a good fit? And in order to see if a school is a good fit, it's really important that you visit. So, as much as you can, visit college campuses. If you can't physically get to a campus to visit, do virtual college tours. You can find virtual college tour information on every institution's website, or you can also take a look at nacac.org, nacac.org, to see which colleges are offering virtual college tours. And for the best experience, it's important to visit campus when schools are in session, really to get a feel for what that campus environment is like. So if you can visit on school days, for example, or anytime when school is in session, you'll really get the best idea of what that institution is like, as opposed to if you are visiting on break or if you are visiting in the summer when classes are likely not in session, you're really not going to get a good idea of what that campus atmosphere is like. So again, when you can, visit campus when school is in session. And when we talk about match, so fit and match are really the two terms that I want to hone in on here. So when we talk about match, match are really the numbers. So think about GPA, think about standardized test scores. Does the school offer the right amount of academic challenge? And how do you know, right? So this is where we look at what the institution's average admit pool is. This is where we look at things like GPA, things like standardized test scores. So when we talk about match, we want to make sure that you are picking a school that is at your academic level. So if you're picking a school way below or way above your academic level, it might lead to boredom, extreme anxiety or stress, it might lead you to drop out or transfer or reduce your admissibility for graduate programs. So specifically, if this program is not a good match for you and your GPA is negatively impacted, then of course that can reduce your admissibility for graduate school. So again, when we talk about match, those are really the numbers. Is this school appropriate for you academically? And that's where we want to look at GPA and standardized test scores and the overall academic level of the institution. So we've got three flavors of colleges. There are literally thousands of schools to choose from in the United States, right? And so this is where the conversation about fit and match come into play. We want to spend some time talking about things to keep in mind and factors to consider as you're pursuing your post-secondary education. So size does matter, right? We've got big schools, we've got small schools, and everything in between. And so when we're talking about the size of a school, these are some examples of what size means. So when we talk about small schools, examples include Carleton College, Grinnell. Really, these are going to be schools that have up to 3,000 students. So schools about the size of Jones or maybe slightly bigger than Jones would be considered a small school. Our medium institutions are going to be schools with between 3,000 and 7,000 students. And so an example of that would be both schools here in Illinois would be Bradley University and University of Chicago. And our larger schools are going to be schools with between 7,000 and 15,000 students. And so again, school right here in our backyard, Loyola University, but then also Harvard is actually considered a large school as well. And then when we're looking at extra large schools, those are going to be your schools with over 20,000 students. So that may not be a good fit for everyone, right? That's where we want to think about what are we looking for in a college campus and also what size institution is most appealing to us. So if you're looking at a smaller school, for example, don't just go by the total population. So many large universities use the school within a school philosophy, okay? And so this is where you may have a large institution, for example, like University of Michigan, but then they also have a residential college program. So essentially that's kind of a smaller school within a larger institution. So don't just look at the total population, right? We want to look at specifically if they have a smaller school at that institution, if you're looking for more of that small school feel. And then along with this, don't rule out small schools because they're in a small town, right? And so Carleton College, for example, is in Minnesota with a population of approximately 19,000, in a town with a population of approximately 19,000. But then it's also pretty close to a bigger city, right? And so you can be in a very small town, but if you have if you're close or if you're in proximity to a larger city, it can make an institution feel bigger, okay? And so don't just rule out a school because it's in a small town, especially if it's close to a larger city that you can get to in a relatively short amount of time. And so we also have public versus private institutions. So I'm going to spend some time talking about really the differences between public and private institutions. So whereas public institutions are funded by the government, private schools are funded by endowments, okay? And so this means they are not government funded. They are funded by donors. So for example, an alum graduates from an institution, they donate money to that institution when they graduate. That is called an endowment. So private colleges do receive endowments, sometimes up to $1 billion, and they get to decide how that money is spent. Whereas with the public institution, because they are funded by the government, there's going to be a lot more stipulation as to how and where that money can be spent. Okay, so with the private schools, oftentimes private institutions do offer fly-in programs. And so that's an opportunity for students to visit that institution for free. Again, because private schools get to decide how they want to spend their money. And so they can have more resources and finances to allocate to things like fly-in programs for students. So keep in mind that if you are looking at public institutions, and specifically if you qualify for a grant, for example, like the MAP grant, which is only given to students who attend college in the state of Illinois. Okay, so if you're looking at and if you qualify for grant money, keep in mind that that is only going to be able to be used in the state of Illinois. So if you choose to go to an out-of-state school, for example, you will not be able to take that grant money, specifically the MAP grant money, with you. And as I mentioned, public schools, they are funded by the government, okay? And so specifically when we're looking at state schools, they save their money for in-state students, okay? So if you choose an out-of-state public school, you're going to be paying out-of-state fees, and you probably won't get much help from that institution. So keep in mind, there are some exceptions to that, but keep in mind that generally public schools, state schools save their money for in-state students and in-state residents. So if you're looking at schools for out of state, you will very likely be paying those out-of-state fees. And there are some exceptions to that, which we will talk about in seminar. So these are also some additional types of schools. So for example, we have liberal arts institutions. And so liberal arts, usually those are more of a general education curriculum focus. So it's really going to be that broad learning. There's going to be more in-depth study in a particular major. Many liberal arts schools do tend to have strong math and science programs. We also have some liberal arts colleges referred to as little Ivies. So these are going to be schools that are really going to be academically and socially equivalent or even sometimes superior to our well-known Ivy League schools. Okay, and so keep in mind as well that many top liberal arts colleges do tend to have a better reputation than many national universities. So some examples of some liberal arts colleges that, again, have incredible reputations would be Amherst. So Amherst in Massachusetts, Connecticut College, Trinity College. And so you can see for yourself, there are many examples here of colleges that have really strong reputations or that are considered little Ivies. And so then when we look at the difference between a liberal arts school and a university, oftentimes at universities, undergraduate courses are going to be taught by graduate students instead of full-time faculty. Now, this is not in every case, right? We do know that full-time faculty do teach classes at universities, but oftentimes classes are taught by grad students as well. And then universities usually tend to have large sports programs that increase their visibility to the public. So you might have a D1 school or D2, D3, right? So usually universities have larger sports programs. They also tend to be larger in size, which means that they have a larger alumni base who can donate more money to the school in later years. Universities are usually more known both in the US and internationally. And then we have some examples of universities here, such as MIT, Yale, UPenn, etc. And as we're talking about consortiums, so consortiums are typically going to be smaller schools that join forces with larger schools or schools with a similar education mission, right? And so the benefit of this is you may go to a small school, for example, like the College of Wooster or Denison. But because it's part of a consortium, you have access to the other schools in that consortium, right? And so if you're enrolled in one school in that consortium, you'll have access to the other campuses. You'll have access to other classes, activities, study abroad options, etc. So we have a few examples here of the different consortiums that are out there. And so the Claremont colleges in California, which can be popular for our students, those include Pomona, Claremont McKenna, Pitzer, Scripps, and Harvey Mudd. So for example, if you attend one of those colleges, because it's part of a consortium, you have access to all 5 of those campuses and or activities at all 5 of those campuses. And then, for example, if you are a student at Amherst, you have access to these other schools as well, once again, because it's a part of a consortium. And so if you're looking specifically into a performing or visual arts type of school, keep in mind that oftentimes there are auditions or a portfolio or a separate application that you're going to be expected to complete. This is in addition to the general university application. Again, oftentimes there's going to be an additional application you have to complete specifically for performing and visual arts training. Students are also able to study at a conservatory. So like Juilliard, for example, is specifically a music school, right? If you're looking at visual art, for example, you could study at an art institute like the SAIC, right? School of the Art Institute of Chicago. You can certainly study at a school like that, or you can choose to study at a conservatory that's part of a larger university. And so like Oberlin College, for example, they have the Oberlin Conservatory. And then you can see here that there is a School of Music at Johns Hopkins University. So you can choose to study at one of these very specific programs for performing and or visual arts training. So when we're talking about broad education versus career prep, so do your research with this, right? So even though like a school like MIT, for example, when we think about MIT, we think, oh, that's for engineers. Well, the school actually offers majors in humanities, arts, and social sciences. So just because a school may specialize in engineering or specialize in a STEM field does not mean that it should be overlooked, because chances are that they offer other majors as well. And think about your career path. So most colleges do not have graduate programs. Universities typically have graduate programs. So universities such as UIC or the U of I. So they have programs where you apply for their graduate programs at the same time you apply for undergraduate. So think about if a pre-professional path is right for you. Think about if you can apply for grad school while you're applying for your bachelor's and or undergraduate degree. So think about what your career path is going to be and if it makes sense for you to apply for undergrad and graduate school at the same time, because some schools, especially universities, do have that option for students. Think about location, right? When we are looking at schools, think about how far from home are you able and willing to go? If you get ill or if it's a holiday, are you going to be able to drive or travel back and forth several times a year? That's going to be something that you want to talk to your parents or guardians or caregivers about, is location and traveling back and forth to and from home. And what form of transportation is needed? Are you going to be a train ride away or a car ride away or a flight away? So have those realistic conversations with your parents and guardians to see what kind of distance makes sense for you. Also think about what type of environment you see yourself in. Are you looking at an urban environment, for example, a big city where there's a lot of people, you have options for public transportation? Are you looking at the suburbs? Right? So think about what type of environment is going to be a good fit for you. Are you looking at a rural environment, a college town, a farm town? And a place with limited public transportation? So these are all questions that you want to ask yourself as you're pursuing your post-secondary pathway, specifically as it relates to college. Money is another critical piece of the conversation, right? So cost is a major factor that you want to consider. So talk to your parents and guardians specifically about the cost of college and what makes sense for you, what is financially feasible for you and your family. So if you're looking at community college is typically going to be a much cheaper bill than an Ivy League school, for example. And specifically, if you are looking at community college in Chicago and you qualify for the STAR Scholarship, that's really an opportunity for you to attend college for 2 years for free. Right? So really look at the cost and what makes sense for you and your family. So don't base your college search solely on money, but it's definitely something to keep in mind and something to think about. Also, make sure that you are applying for scholarships and financial aid throughout this year and really next year as well. We'll be talking a lot about scholarships and financial aid. So make sure you use the resources that are available to you. So then digging deeper into college, this is where we want to look closer at the institution's website to see what is the history of that institution. What is their mission and philosophy? What are their values? Do those values align with your values? And this is where fit comes into play as well. So what I talked about earlier, is this place a campus or an institution that you see yourself remaining at, that you see yourself thriving at and doing well at? Right. And so that's where it's important to look into the mission and the philosophy and the values of that institution. And do those things align with yours? Look at the yearly calendar. Some schools are going to be on semesters. Some other schools may be on trimesters or quarters. So take a look at that school's website and really do a deep dive into that school's website. And this is also where you can see which programs and degrees they have. This is where you can see whether or not, the institution offers the program or the major that you're looking for. So make sure that you are perusing that website and finding out everything that you can. And Naviance is also another great resource, which we will be talking more about that in seminar as well. And so as you're looking at the institution, these are some more things to think about. And so when we talk about values, when we talk about fit, these are things that you want to consider. What is important to you, right? So reflect. Do you want to be in a place with a lot of different people, or do you want to be surrounded by people who look and think and act just like you? How have you experienced diversity at Jones? That's something to think about. And how do you want your next experience to be similar or different? So when we talk about diversity, that can include religion, it can include gender identity, sexual identity, race, ethnicity. A bunch of different factors go into play when we talk about diversity. And so again, is diversity something that's important to you? And think about what you want the diversity to look like on your college campus. So the only way to know how schools and programs handle diversity is to ask. Make sure you ask those questions, make sure you research, and make sure you visit as much as you can. And these are some other things that you want to keep in mind as you're choosing college. So see what academic supports are available. Are you a student who's regularly relied on tutoring from your teacher in the past? If so, you want to make sure that that campus has academic supports. Are you a student who has mental health needs? Or maybe you have a 504 or an IEP for health or mental health reasons. So you want to see what type of services is that campus able to provide you. You want to make sure you're asking those questions. What does mental health support look like on that campus? What does medical support, academic support, what do those things look like on that college campus? We want to make sure that the campus is a safe place, right? So we want to ask about campus safety. You want to ask about school culture. Is athletics something that's important to you? Is school pride something that's important to you? Those are questions that you want to be asking, and that's why it's also important to do research and visit schools as much as you can. Some schools, if you go to an orientation, for example, or if you go to like a campus tour, they will have people there to give you a first-person student perspective. Okay, sometimes there's even blogs out there specifically through that institution that will allow you to get other students' perspectives and hear about other students' experience. Also, some things to be mindful of are their persistence rates. Look at the graduation rate, right? Check and see what is the percent of students that are graduating from that institution. You also want to be mindful of that institution's first year retention. And that means how many students are going back to that institution after their first year. So how well is that institution doing at keeping its students? That is what persistence means. And so these are areas that you want to consider and things that you want to be mindful of as you're looking into college. And so keep in mind that juniors are going to be expected to choose 5 first choice colleges this year. And you can find more information about that first choice college activity. You can find more information about that in your counselor's Google Classroom. So in order for a school to be considered a first choice, it must meet all 5 of these criteria. So first and foremost, your academic profile, so not what you hope to achieve senior year, but your current academic profile, so GPA specifically, is within the typical or average admit pool for that institution. So that's where we're looking at GPA and even standardized test scores. Do those things fall in line with the average student who is admitted to that institution? So that's referred to as match. We also want to look at the school's social and cultural pieces and if those are a good fit. We refer to that again as fit. So look at that institution, look at that campus environment. Do the values at that institution? Does the mission, do all of those different pieces align with what you're looking for? Another first choice criteria, the financial needs are met or taken into consideration. That's where those net price calculators come into play. And we will continue to talk about that during seminar. But you want to look at the net price calculator on that institution's website. And so every public institution out there has a net price calculator on their website. That's where you want to be talking to your parents and guardians and doing some numbers crunching to see what is going to be the cost for you to attend said institution. Okay, net price calculators being in your family's financial range is especially important. And then you are excited about the school. We call that the hypometer, which of course is not a real thing, but you get the point, right? In order for a school to be a first choice, you have to be excited about the institution. And then lastly, the selectivity of the school. How difficult is it for a student to get admitted? You should be looking at the selectivity. And so I would suggest that you don't apply to only highly selective schools. If you are only applying to schools that admit 2 to 5% of their applicants, that's a problem, right? We need to be looking at schools with a range of selectivity. So we can look at highly selective schools, but then also make sure you're looking at schools that are only more like moderately selective, for example. And so you should have a range of selectivity with the schools that you are interested in and applying to. So in order for a college to be considered a first choice, all 5 of these criteria have to be met. And you need at least 5 first choice schools on your college list. And that list that I'm referring to is the colleges I'm thinking about list in Naviance. And again, more information will be shared about that in seminar. But plan to have at least 5 first choice schools on your college list. And you can certainly add more schools to your list as long as you have those 5 first choice schools on there that meet the very basic criteria. And so these are some additional research resources for you all. Naviance is a great resource. We're going to be talking about that really ongoing throughout seminar. And so in Naviance, there is the Supermatch tool. There's also going to be scattergrams and a couple different other resources that are available to you. CPS on their Learn, Plan, Succeed website, they have great resources no matter if your plan is college or something else. And then Big Future is another great resource, and you can access that on the College Board. Basically, that's going to be a questionnaire that asks you about your preferences as it relates to college, and then it's going to spew a list for you based on your preferences for college. And these are some additional resources. And as I mentioned, the net price calculator, strongly recommend that you look at that really to calculate the cost of college. And also make sure that you're talking to your counselor, or if you know of any college students or you have any like mentors or anything like that that are college age, make sure you're tapping into those resources as well and talking to your parents and guardians. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but it is meant to give you an idea of the different resources that are out there and at your disposal. And so if you have questions, please be sure to ask your counselor during seminar. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening.